Welcome back, you're watching Morning Live. Thanks for staying with the show. We're quickly approaching 7 o'clock, but let's focus in on this now because all across Gauteng, this was heard over Boxing Day braais. The Johannesburg Roads Agency says that the M1 South Bridge at the Booysens off-ramp has not collapsed. The JRA says the paving bricks under the bridge caved in due to water erosion. However, many road users are still worried and concerned about pictures that they've seen of the scene. To give us a little bit more clarity on the matter, I'm joined by Siyabonga Nodu, Acting Managing Director of the JRA. Good morning and welcome to Morning Live.
Morning, Veilan. Thank you.
Mr. Nodu, so explain to us, we understand there was a storm water drain that caused all the erosion.
Yes. Yes, so what actually happens is that on the freeway, that is on the actual bridge deck above, we've got stormwater channels from which water would go under the bridge through gutters that is collected under the bridge. So what had happened, the assessment that was done yesterday proved that where the water actually goes through in order to go under the bridge, there was some rubble that was there. But also we had very heavy rains, Veilan, I must say, uncharacteristic of this period. So the combination of those heavy rains and also the rubble that was in the system caused the stormwater pipes not to channel the water directly to the concrete gutters under the bridge so that it leaves the structure completely. But what had happened is the water moved sideways and it moved into a section of the embankment on the right-hand side from underneath, which area we now suspect there could have been cracks which allowed the water to seep into the structure. Now, that embankment under it is what is called mining sand. Okay. Now, that mining sand was actually eroded from underneath, and as it continued to be eroded, those bricks then fell off. And actually then, that as you see in the pictures that were shown yesterday, we then had that hole that has since been created under there.
I mean, it's a pretty scary hole because we're looking at the visuals now, yes. And that's not just from the recent heavy rains. That looks as if it's been going on for some period of time, if that is the kind of erosion that we see in that mine soil underneath that paving.
Look, the reality is that there could have been a problem before in terms of the weakness of the structure, to the extent that when the water came, it actually caused significant damage. But I can assure you that from a structural point of view, the bridge itself is okay. There is nothing wrong with the bridge structure from its foundation all the way to the ground up. There is nothing wrong with our bridge decks. The real problem is on the stormwater system. And what I can tell you is that perhaps we could have been more careful in terms of ensuring that all our stormwater would have been cleaned timeously before these heavy rains. We do our level best, and this could be one of those instances where the rubble actually was not cleaned on time, and to the extent that it caused the damage that it had caused.
Okay, so let's focus in on this rubble that you say was actually blocking the storm water drain, which would have channeled the water away from that area where it's now eroded and the paving has fallen in. So do you have people that are actually looking for rubble in the storm water drains? Because this is across the roads and across all of the highways in Gauteng.
No, you're correct. So we do have those people. So what we have, just to give an example on what we are doing there and what has been done there as of yesterday, after we established what had happened, we got a jet vac to actually clean up all the pipes there. We had people clean up at the top, all the channels where the water comes in, and the V-drain, because the main problem is when the water comes into the V-drain, that's where the blockage would happen. But then once the water gushes through, it gushes through with that rubble, which then would lead to the water going sideways. So that cleaning up has been done as of yesterday, and also the drains themselves, where the water actually goes into under the bridge. And what we have also done is that we have backfilled that section now. If you were to go back there today, you will find there's a backfilling up to halfway of where there is that gaping hole that you had seen yesterday. And these are all the things we're doing to try and stabilize the situation. But on the issue of the drainage system, we have to be more the wiser in all the other bridges. That is something that we cannot take away.
Are you not a little bit concerned because that erosion that we saw there that I'm not a structural engineer or a weather person, but I would say that erosion that caused that paving to collapse, that's been something that's been happening more than just the recent heavy rains. It's maybe something that has been happening over a period of time. So over a period of time, those stormwater drains had rubble in them, which caused the water to go and start eroding that sand away. So you're not worried about what may have happened under other bridges in Gauteng?
Look, we are concerned. I mean, as the JRA, the safety of our motorists is of essence. I mean, and the road users in particular. So we are concerned. There's no way we would not be concerned. However, I think what we want to clarify is that there has been a narrative that, for example, what had happened there is a collapse of a bridge structure. And that's what we wanted to clarify. Now, coming to whether this has been happening over time, it could have been the case that it has been happening on a smaller scale, up to a point where there would have been a crack and the water just went in and once off then washed away a lot of the sand under there, which then led to the instability that led to the displacement of those paving bricks on that embankment.
Okay, so we understand it'll take a little more to stabilize the area. What should motorists know when they're driving there? You say the bridge is safe to use.
Bridge is safe to use.
Okay.
Because remember, the bridge structure is above. Where this has happened is actually under the bridge.
Yeah.
But there, that is where you have the on-ramp from Booysens into the M2 freeway, into the M1, freeway. What we have done is we have cleaned the area. So we want the drivers to know we have cleaned it from the sand. We have unblocked the drains in that area so that should rains come in the next few days, there wouldn't be a blockage, there wouldn't be flooding on that road. It is safe to use. But in terms of the bridges themselves, the bridges are safe to use. We are not concerned about any structural integrity that could have happened to the bridge, because none. We went there with a bridge engineer yesterday. He checked with us from the top all the way down. And even how we are actually responding to the matter is exactly based on the assessment that had been conducted by that bridge engineer.
So I understand that repairs will begin next month, and that's to that embankment.
The repairs will indeed start next month. The only reason being we could have done it sooner and we would have wanted to do it sooner. But as you would know, Veland, we have a situation where the contractors have closed and also the service providers have closed. So it's a holiday period. However, our standby teams are the ones that are doing all the work at the current moment. So it's our own internal teams within the JRA. They are the ones who have cleaned the stormwater drainage. They are the ones who are backfilling the section to ensure that there is stability. They are the ones who also reconstructed the channel, the water channel that had been displaced as well under the bridge. So that work is being done, but it's interim work. That's what we just want to indicate. It's interim work to ensure the safety of road users under the bridge. But above the bridge, there is really nothing wrong with the structure. The road should be used as it was used before, and the bridge is in a good condition to be used.
Here on Morning Live a couple of weeks ago,
yes,
we were very excited, along with a lot of motorists
yes,
in the province,
yes,
that the M2 was reopened. Lots
yes,
of repair work was
yes,
done there. Why was repair work done there and other bridges were overlooked? Because surely when motorists see these kinds of images, that's what comes to mind.
Yes. So we have 50 bridges that we have prioritized. And as I had indicated yesterday to one of your colleagues, which would cost us at least in the region of about 5 billion to repair. It's money that we do not have. However, those are priority bridges that are being attended to by way of repairs and maintenance in the interim. But we know for a fact that in the long run, we actually need to rehabilitate them, which is the extensive work that would have been done similar to the one that was done on the M2. I must state that with the M2, when we realized that there was a danger for the continued use of that road because of the volumes that it was carrying, we decided to close the road in order to ensure safety of all road users. I'm saying even this particular one, if the risk was that high to the extent that we would have to do so, we would have done that. And the reason we're not doing it is because what has happened at this bridge is not on the same scale as the M2. But also you would recall that with the M2 as well, it was a number of bridges. There's bridge structures. I mean, the area from Kazene to Selby is about 4.8 kilometers, thereabout. Now, you can imagine that it was a long stretch, whereas this particular one, we're talking about a bridge, but the rehabilitation program will apply to all the major bridges around the city, and we will ensure that the safety of our road users is always put forth.
Mr. Nodu, if you maintain the bridges, surely a full-scale rehabilitation wouldn't be necessary?
If we maintain you're correct. However, what we are saying is, at the moment, those bridges that I have referred to need rehabilitation. We have started with the M2. There are other bridges that we are busy with, 50. Around 5 bridges. 50 that
And that's just in Johannesburg?
That is just in Johannesburg. We have a lot of bridges around. And let me just also add this by clarifying that most of these bridges were built in the 60s and 70s. So it's very important that note is taken of the fact that the structure of the bridges is still good. A bridge has a lifespan of about 50 to 60 years. However, with precise maintenance and ensuring repairs where there's a need for those, it's very important that they are attended to. You would have to take note of the fact that some of the failures on the bridge may actually be in the structure that is underneath, where you actually have to open up the bridge in order to be able to pick some of these things up. For example, just to give an example, on the M2.
The erosion underneath that we saw now?
Yeah.
Is that the kind of thing that you're talking about?
But the point I'm making is that a bridge structure starts from a foundation up.
Yeah.
So that embankment is actually closing up, for example, a section of the bridge.
Sure.
So the point I'm making is, when a structural engineer goes there to do an assessment, there's a number of tests that are undertaken to check whether there has been any movement, whether there are any cracks and all of that. And these assessments are done on an ongoing basis. In terms of the bridges management system, the bridges have to be inspected at least once a year. As the GRA, we have realized, with the limited resources we have realized that we actually have to do that at least twice a year. And in some instances where we're concerned, we have to actually do it more frequently, just to make sure that at a point when a bridge needs to be closed, we would not be too late to have made that decision. And that's basically the approach that we have taken.
How safe are the city's highways? Because in the last 2 years, we've actually seen 2 bridges collapse.
The city's highways are safe. What we are doing as the GRA is that as and when we get the results of the assessments, we look at the kind of traffic that goes through there, the volumes. We look at the continued use of that road also by heavy-duty vehicles. Maybe the other issue I must raise with you is that when some of these roads were built, it was, in the 60s, it would have been built on the basis of a different type of traffic and sure, numbers and absolutely. So on. So we have to accept the fact that the infrastructure with time is going to take a little bit of a pounding, because you now have trucks that are going through some from the N3 all the way to the N1 from other provinces and all of that. So there is a number of factors that would cause that. But this punitive weather, if I would call it, where you have these heavy rains, is not doing us any favors either. On the M2, you will recall we had a situation where the water ingress caused the problems there. The water actually got into the bridge structure, actually caused the concrete to have what is called an alkali aggregate reaction, which is some form of concrete cancer. So it caused these bulges inside. It was cracking from within. Now, you have to understand that you needed to have had your engineers checking there timeously to make sure that we never get to a space where there would have been a collapse. So one of the critical things that we have learned from the incident, for example, of Boxing Day, which we saw on late on Christmas Day, is that we have to ensure that our stormwater system on all our freeways is actually well maintained, and we are responsive and ensure it's cleaned and it's working properly. Because once the water gets onto the road, you know there would be potholes. Once the water gets onto the concrete on the bridge structure, it actually then would create serious challenges in terms of compromising that the strength of that bridge structure or even its integrity.
So you say that part of the problem is that the oversight, perhaps, in making sure that people are checking these bridges, checking these roads, checking these embankments, weren't done on a regular basis? Because if they were, surely these problems would have been picked up.
So they are done on a regular basis, but I'm sure you will understand that because of the many bridges that we have, there's a chance, for example, the bridge before that could have been checked, and prior to going to this bridge, this had actually happened. I mean, literally, when those engineers go out to do those assessments for us, they can do so many bridges a day, or they can do so many bridges over a month. However, what we are saying is that we could improve on the pace of the actual cleaning of our stormwater system, of the checking. We could improve on that, and as the JRA, we take full responsibility of ensuring that we will actually have this information available timeously, and will communicate timeously in instances where we see these things, even before at times they are just picked up by the public, but that we as the JRA would actually have gone there and checked the integrity of our structures and the functionality of our stormwater drainage, especially prior to the heavy rain season, which is in summer.
Mr. Nodu, do you think that you've managed the engineers properly, that they've been checking the bridges as they should do? Because if they're checking them timeously, things like this would be picked up before we have collapses.
All right, so you would have a situation where there would be data that is there, that the engineers would have to rely on to check what has been done before. There would have been gaps in some instances on the work that would have been done. When the engineers go to the structures, we emphasize that they must go check the structure in its totality, so that we do not just rely on data that exists, but we get information real time. As you had raised the question, are we, for example, in a position where we can say to you, we have checked all our bridges and we know what is happening in each bridge? We have checked the majority of the bridges. We continue to check them, and we're improving on the frequency of checking our bridges, just to make sure that these kinds of incidents are picked up by the JRA well before they can be exposed to the public.
You mentioned something very interesting a little earlier on in our conversation, and that was that a lot of the bridges around Johannesburg were built in a time and for a world that we don't currently have, so in the 60s, right? And you say that the lifespan of a bridge is between 50 and 60 years. So the JRA knew that coming up to this point in 2010, 2020, that our bridges would need to be replaced, full rehabilitation would need to be done on them.
Yes, correct. But you would also understand that the resources is what is really at the heart of all of this. However, when we go and look at the bridges, remember the bridges are made of various components. There will be components that critically we have to make sure that no matter what the circumstances, the maintenance has to be done, even up to a rehabilitative stage, to make sure that the bridge's condition is actually improved. If we had the resources to actually improve all our bridges. Sorry, ma'am?
Where are the resources?
No, the resources are being shared with other competing interests. As you would know, you have health, you have social development needs, and other needs in a city. So the JRA is not sitting there just getting the money that it would need. For example, if we needed 10 billion, the city has to look at what are the other competing interests, where there are also other matters that need to be attended to urgently, and spread the money adequately in order to ensure that the JRA has a sufficient budget to do what needs to be done. In instances, for example, like the M2, just to give you an example, that was dealt with as an emergency. The city said, let us stop whatever we're going to do on certain aspects. Let's shift the money from some of the areas that were going to be attended to by the JRA and invest the funds there. But what that did is that you then shifted the funds now, but you still have to deal with those matters that you would have had to deal with. At the moment, we are going through what is called the medium-term budget adjustment. We have put through a request for additional funding in light of the fact that some of the money had been used in dealing with the M2, so that we can get to those bridges that were planned to deal with during the financial year.
Mr. Nodu, thank you very much for coming in and speaking to us here on Morning Live.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Siyabonga Nodu, the Acting Managing Director of the Johannesburg Roads Agency, known as the JRA, giving us an update on the state of the bridges, as well as what we saw at the Booysens off-ramp here in Johannesburg.